I know my ancestors were among the first Europeans to come to these shores, sailing from France 400 years ago. Philippe dEntremont arrived in Nova Scotia in 1649. He brought a wife and children and the ability to read and write.
When Philippe dEntremont came over and settled this area here...
Historian Neil Boucher is my guide to my past.
Many European powers tried to settle various parts of North America at the same time, okay? Now, many of these European powers were enemies in Europe. The colonies of these traditional European enemies also became enemies in North America. The British were close by. The Dutch were close by.
Philippe dEntremont was forced out of his village of Pubnico 20 years after he arrived. So were so many other settlers. It was the beginning of an exile to be repeated throughout the history of Acadia. 80 years after Philippe was forced from Pubnico by the Dutch, many thousands of Acadians would be routed by the British in the Great Expulsion.
The Acadian deportation, which included members of the dEntremont family, as many other Acadian families at the time, is certainly a watershed in the history of Acadians all over the world. It was an attempt at cultural genocide.
Like Philippe, 100 years before, no law, no fear, no force could stop Acadians from returning to Nova Scotia. Permitted by the British to come back, many Acadians who had been exiled to Boston, Louisiana, and France reclaimed their land, including we dEntremonts.
The dEntremonts are one of the few groups, if not the only group, in all of Acadian history that would not only come back to the same colony of their exile, would come back to the very same lands from which they had been exiled.
Observe the laws of Canada and fulfill my duties as a Canadian citizen.